Hi everybody, welcome to week 9. This week we're doing non-verbal communication, but before I record that lecture, I would first of all like you to watch this video, which will give you some more information and insights on your assessment. Now remember, if you for some reason don't understand what's required of you, that you can email me to get in contact with me and ask further questions. So I'm just going to share my screen so that we can look at the assessment together. Okay, so you're seeing now what I'm seeing, so let's just have a look at this. So this is your assignment 3, your reflective journal for COU 101A. It's due on at the end of the week on Friday, on week 11, the end of week 11 on Sunday at 11:55 p.m. Once again, don't leave it to the last minute to upload. It can make it really tricky for you. Okay, so what you're asked to do here is submit a reflective personal journal documenting your progress in learning, applying interpersonal communication skills covered in the subject in a range of circumstances and contexts. So what we're looking for here is your kind of journey through the subject. So each week you would be learning new concepts and new ideas, and of course if you haven't actually written them formally anywhere, down anywhere, you can go back through your discussion forum posts and have a little think there about what's been going on for you each week. But yeah, we really want to hear from you about your experiences of kind of applying what you've learned in a range of circumstances and contexts. Now, I've taught interpersonal communications very many times now, and I find that every time I do it, I get something more from it. And that's because as you go through, you sort of confront things that you know already, and you may have already kind of done a lot of practices, even like formal practices around moving through some of these stages. But we are human beings, and as human beings, we are in a state of constant flux. And so when you come back to these kinds of exercises and ideas, if you really apply them, you will find that you've got something out of them, I'm sure, and that you have something to share with me. Okay, so this is worth 35 marks, 35%. And just to remind you, if you need an extension, please ask beforehand because, submissions past the due date incur a penalty. So what this assignment is doing is asking you to document and reflect on your learning journey through the unit and apply interpersonal skills appropriately in a range of contexts. So what does that mean? That means that you tell us what's been going on for you as you've been going through the course. And as you've kind of successfully and unsuccessfully applied interpersonal communication skills. Now, what can happen when you focus on a particular communication skill is that you can almost go too far or it becomes too much. Now, I remember, I think it was at the end of last year, teaching a communications and counselling course. We did a lot of work one day on eye contact. And so the next day I had to go and meet a lot of new people in a professional kind of context that I hadn't met before. And I had this idea of eye contact, maintaining eye contact, to be respectful, etc., etc. And one of the people in the group had really big eyes, and he was like really cute looking with these really big eyes. And it was like, I'd kind of almost taken it a step too far in that I was connecting with everybody using this kind of eye contact, but because this person had these really big eyes, it was like too much for me, and it kind of threw me. So those kinds of experiences are the kinds of experiences that we're looking for. So, we can apply all of these ideas and techniques, but sometimes we don't kind of get it right every time, as in my example that I just gave. So what we've asked you to do is keep a weekly reflective journal throughout the term. Now, you would have done this as you've been connecting with the discussion forum, and some of you might have, done it formally, writing on pieces of paper, or you can start doing it now. So the example here is that you might attempt to practice some assertiveness skills in your workplace and reflect on the experience in your weekly entry in your journal. Now, I've had an experience of teaching a class where somehow people started kind of in class reflecting on things that were wrong in their employment, and they decided that they were all going to go to work and be more assertive about what they wanted and what they didn't want in the workplace. One person left their job, another person was asked to leave their job, and people sort of ended up changing their employment as a result of it. Many people, some people's employment experiences were better as a result of it. But it was just really interesting to see how putting these principles in place had changed people's lives. So you're encouraged to write freely and summarise and condense each weekly entry down to 200 words for submission. Now remember, we want to know what's been going on for you, and you need to kind of lift the lid on what is going on for you to do really well here. Excuse me. Now, I have been reading a book which is called, it's called The Making of a Therapist. And it's talking about, the trials and tribulations that go with learning to become a therapist. And what he talks about here is about how sometimes we like to keep a lid on things. So we don't necessarily tell, or we don't necessarily kind of let ourselves look underneath and see what's really going on. So if you just give me a moment here, I'm sorry, I seem to have lost the page. And I can't stop the recording once I start. Okay. I'm sorry, I can't find the exact passage, but what he talks about here is like when you learn using psychotherapy, which we do in this course, it's like the person who you are learning the most from is yourself. So if you aren't prepared to kind of lift the lid and look underneath at what's really going on for you, it's very difficult to progress through a psychotherapy course. And this, of course, can be very challenging because it's very tempting to think about ourselves as a project that's completed. I once was this thing, now I'm this thing, so I can look back and reflect on myself in the distant past and see how I've changed and how all of these kinds of concepts relate to me now compared to the person I was. But looking at the little micro processes of change, which we do in this course because we do it over a short period of time, can be very, very uncomfortable. And this is probably for many of you your first experience of doing this in a psychotherapy kind of a context. So you will learn to do this more as time goes on, and you would have done some of this also in your on-campus course, your residential that you came to. But this is what we're looking for in this reflective piece. So, you need to tell us what's really going on for you right now. So you're encouraged to write freely and summarise and condense each weekly entry down to 200 words. So you should put particular emphasis on the use of the following interpersonal skills. So they are rapport development, listening skills, assertiveness skills, verbal communication and use of language, appropriate non-verbal skills, cultural difference and diversity in communication, the use of silence and power, which I'm going to leave you to look at yourselves. It's addressed for this week anyway. It's addressed in this week's study guide and other notes. And your communication in the future. So your communication in the future one is kind of going to be part of your conclusion, of course. Now, you may not be addressing all of these, and I'm not going to go through and tick them off, but I would like to see you addressing a range of these things. It's likely that there's going to be some kind of theme. There may not be. There may be different things kind of going on in different weeks, but it's likely that there'll be some kind of a theme going through your reflections and your 200-word summaries. So what we need in order to make sense of this these, series of paragraphs essentially as an introduction. So we've given you 250 words to set the scene, which is a good amount, and it gives you a couple of probably 2, maybe 3 paragraphs to kind of set up what's really going on for you and give us an overview of what's happened for you in the course. So then an entry for each week, so 200 words each, and then identification of the key skills you used, a definition of those skills, and a description of how they were applied using verbatim examples. Now keep your definitions brief, okay? Another thing that this chapter that this book makes the point of is that, it's not, when it comes to being a good therapist, or developing good communication skills, it's not your ability to understand and connect with the literature which is a problem. It is your kind of ability to kind of put it into practice. And so what you're demonstrating here is not so much that you understand what's been going on, because I know that you all do, I can see that from the discussion forums, but how it's affected you, so the changes that it's made for you. So that is about identifying the key skills, but just don't spend too much of your word allowance on that. What we want to really see is a description of how they were used and some examples. So verbatim examples are kind of word for word examples. So then also we want to see an analysis of the effectiveness of these skills. For example, how the person responded. So, for example, in my example above, where I became uncomfortable with looking into this person's eyes with particularly big eyes, I'm not sure, 100% sure that he was aware or made uncomfortable by the fact that I felt staring at him. But usually, when you feel something like that, the other person has some kind of idea that you're feeling uncomfortable. So he may have clocked that for some reason I was feeling uncomfortable in my communication with him at a certain point. I mean, I'm only talking like a point in time my example relates to. So it's not necessarily going to be any kind of major incident that you're talking about. It can be something quite minor, like the one in one of your 200-word weekly entries, like what I've just talked about now. But of course, it may be something major that you kind of have been, you may have been dealing with a particular issue. And so if that's been the case, then, your weekly summaries are going to relate to that as well. So it may be something more major as well. Or, for example, the assertiveness in the workplace example that I used before, that would definitely have been quite a major thing for people as they kind of worked through that over the course of the semester. Okay, so, and after your analysis of the effectiveness of the skills, we want a summary section, which is, again, is a nice generous summary section, 250 words, and in here we want to know just an overview of what you've learned from the journal and how you're going to apply that knowledge going forward. So this journal is assessing for your capacity to reflect on and integrate the theory into your personal communication. So it's written in the first person, me, I, and it uses literature to support the commentary. But once again, it's more your experience that I'm interested in here than the literature. Okay, thank you. Just try turning this off. There we go, stop share. Okay.